Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the February 7th meeting of the Lee County Board of County Commissioners. I've got 9:31 for the time. I'd like to begin this morning with the invocation and asking Pastor Matt Richard from City Gate Ministries to please join us at the podium. Would everyone please rise for the invocation? Morning, Pastor.
Good morning, Commissioners. This morning I would like to start with a verse. Romans 13:1 says, "Let everyone submit to the governing authorities, since there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are instituted by God." Heavenly Father God, we thank you first and foremost for your leadership, for your kingdom rule. We thank you for the commissioners that you have put into authority and leadership today. Father God, we thank you that you would give them and lead them with wisdom, with instruction, understanding, and peace. Father, we ask that they would lead this community and this county with hope, with provision, and with joy. Father God, we know that you are working all things together for the good of your people. So we pray that today there would be a peace over this room, that each and every person would know that we are working in unison to see the people of Lee County prosper. Father, have your way. We ask that your will would be done. In Jesus' name, amen.
Pastor, thank you.
Thank you.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right. Good reminder to check your cell phones before we get too deep into the meeting. All right, so this morning we have one ceremonial presentation, and at this time I'd like to recognize Commissioner Pendergrass.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could have Karen, and we have a guest in the house. I think is his nickname P. Diddy? Yeah, not Pablo. That's Pablo with the low rider there. So we have a new guest this morning. So he's actually across of a pit in adoption.
Yep.
Wow. So you see the resemblance with the leg, and he's looking for a home, and hopefully someone will see him and adopt him this week. And Karen, I know we got a lot of good things going on in Animal Services this month with Valentine's Day. If you want to tell us anything else that's going on.
Yes, so this month we invite you to look for love in all the right places, which of course is Animal Services. And all our adoptions are just $14 with an approved application. Kitten season is just starting. So we actually do have quite a few adult cats in our house right now, and our dog adoption floor is full. We had a good adoption day on Saturday, but they keep coming in. And as you can see, we have our designer breed here with our Diddy. Hence his name, P. Diddy. He's quite the superstar here. And a Steelers fan, as you can see. He's got some taste, so that's right, Dave. That's right. So come on down to Animal Services. We invite you down to check out our dog adoption floor and cats. And we do have a guinea pig, too, today. So.
There we go. Well, hopefully you'll come down and adopt instead of buying, and that'd be great because I know we have a full house
Absolutely.
right now. This happens every year after Christmas. A lot of people acquire animals, and we're going to see it a few months after Easter. We're going to have a lot of rabbits in the shelter too. So,
yes. Yep.
Anyway, thank you for everything, and thank you for what you're doing, and hopefully I'll find a good home this week. What do you think, Dave? You take him home with you?
He comes with the scarf.
Okay, thank you, Paula.
Good luck, P. Diddy. Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Pendergrass, for that wonderful ceremonial presentation, and we really do wish P. Diddy good luck. And thank you to all the folks at Animal Services for what they do. At this time, we'll take up the recap, but before we get into our business, I understand we have Mayor Kevin Anderson joining us today, and we also have City Manager from Fort Myers, Marty, joining us today, Marty Lawing. So thank you, Marty, for joining us as well. All right, let's get into the recap. Under items to be deferred and continued, we have none. Under revisions and corrections, we have 2 revisions and corrections being recommended by our administration on A5 and on C12. Do I have a motion to make those revisions as outlined on the recap?
Move the item.
Okay. Second. Motion from Commissioner Pendergrass and second from Commissioner Ruane. Do we have any further discussion on that? Does anybody wish to speak in public comment on just the revisions to those items? We'll take them up later for consideration. Okay, seeing none, then I'll close public comment. Are there any further discussion or questions on that? Any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. All right, at this time, we are going to take up the consent agenda. Commissioner Greenwell, do you have any items to be pulled for discussion?
I do not.
Okay, Commissioner Pendergrass?
I do not.
Okay, I have none. Commissioner Sandelli? Commissioner
No, sir.
Ruane? None. Okay, very good. So at this time, I'd like to take public comment on the consent agenda items. I have Speaker Marcia Ellis who would like to speak on several items. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you. I would like to address attention to consent item number 10, which is an authorization of Conservation 2020 to pick up at tax auction a parcel in Alva. I have a problem with this agenda item because the last Conservation 2020 meeting in January was canceled. At that time, I think that this property could have been brought forth, and this is just another example of the protocol that has been set up to protect public interest in 2020 not being followed. I will go on to say further that the nomination process has not happened to evaluate the ecological and conservation value of this parcel, and that within the public lands, within properties that are held in trust, there are properties that have significant conservation value that are not going through an atypical process like this in order to be entered into protection. I will point out that we have scientific studies that have looked regionally at conservation value of properties and properties that have formerly been held in Conservation 2020 Trust and no longer enjoy those protections. I think it is hypocritical and a violation of public trust for atypical processes like these to be brought forth directly to the commissioner and for an infill parcel through tax deed participation or purchase that has not been evaluated. We've run into trouble in the past with these atypical processes leading to public outrage and feeling like that public lands have not been given the protection guaranteed through the Conservation 2020 process. And so I adamantly object to this continuing, and I ask that we have an evaluation of the use of our public lands for things like utilities and roads and how we manage those properties in the public trust. And we have some clearer adherence to those protocols going forth. I also want to speak, and excuse me while I look back at 23, which is the award of contract for design permitting for the Green Meadow WTP, which I guess is a new invention of an old name. I think we're moving way too quickly to be awarding permit on something that has just been brought forth for public consideration and has previously been identified as priority restoration 1 property in the Dover Coal. I ask that any movement forward on placing facilities or roads on Conservation 2020 lands be tabled in order to better evaluate the impacts of these atypical maneuvers impacting the public trust. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ellis. Our next speaker is William Joe Schottmiller, and that's the final speaker that turned in a card for the consent agenda. Morning, sir.
Morning. William Joseph Schottmiller. I noticed on the confirm ratify resolutions extending to state local emergency funding. I would like to know more about that funding. Also, I'm glad to see our leaders from the city council and the all together in the county, because I'm sure we're going to be all work together. You know, that's what it's about. I like the minister's preach sermon that we are working together to better all the people in our communities. So as you know, I'm an advocate to make sure that everybody is taken care of, you know, serving our God. We need housing. We need the emergency housing until others can be built. We're not saying right downtown. We're saying centrally located where people can get to a bus. You got all kinds of property, maybe the city and the county own, and the advocates would like to look at all of these so we can know what could be done. And the investors get their investors also, but we need the seed money. So if there's grants out there, we need them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That is the last card I had for public comment on the consent agenda. Does anybody else wish to speak on any of the items on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing no further
Move the balance.
speakers.
Second.
We'll close public comment. We have a motion to approve the balance from Commissioner Pendergrass, and the second is from Commissioner Ruane. Do we have any further discussion on that? Any questions? All right, then I'll go ahead and call the question. Are there any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. At this time, we'll take up the administrative agenda, and I'd like to recognize Deputy County Manager Harner to introduce item number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item is to approve annexation and a local agreement with the City of Fort Myers for Marvez Street, and I will ask Mr. Loveland to address the item.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dave Loveland, Community Development. I'm here to discuss actually items 1 through 4 on the administrative agenda. These are 4 separate interlocal agreements related to annexation of enclave areas within the City of Fort Myers. These were prepared by the City of Fort Myers and executed at their end and presented to us for execution by the county. This is a process that is authorized under statute these days, so that if an area is under 110 acres in size and is developed and it's completely surrounded by the city, it can be annexed through this interlocal agreement process. And the general premise is that for these enclave areas, it's more efficient and cost effective for the cities to provide the services for these areas versus the county having to do this. There are 4 separate areas as proposed by the city to be annexed. So there's 4 separate agenda items, 4 separate agreements. So you're free to act on all of them or none of them at your desire. The first one is the Marvez Street annexation area. It's 8 residential lots that front on Marvez Street. It's south of Winkler Avenue and west of US 41. And you can see the picture there. The Sheriff's Office provides the police services for those lots, fire protections by the City of Fort Myers, water and sewer in that area is by the City of Fort Myers, and garbage collection is through the city's contract. So the access is to a city-maintained street. The net effect of annexation for both this area and the other ones that we're going to talk about is that these ultimately would revert to the City of Fort Myers tax rolls, these properties. The county would no longer be responsible for providing any services in these areas, meaning the Sheriff's Office wouldn't have to provide services for these annexation areas. Lee County Solid Waste wouldn't have to provide garbage services. The city would be responsible for water and sewer. A number of the properties in some of the annexations are actually on septic still. So, and there's questions I know from some of the residents about whether they're going to be required to connect to the sewer. That's a question not for the county, but for the city. And as you mentioned, the city manager, Marty Loing, is here, and the city community development director, Steve Belden, to answer those kind of questions if you need them.
Very good. Commissioner Pendergrass, you have a question?
Dave, I have a quick question for you. Know the area, this is right across the street for identifying for people. It's right across the street from Orangewood School. I used to live just south of it, but is there a reason, I don't know this historically, it's always been in the county, is the reason why, I mean, I've heard in the past why the residents did not want to become part of the city. And I know, did the city and the county both advertise to the residents for notification this was occurring?
The city indicated that they sent out certified letters last year, I think around April, to all the affected property owners. They provided us that exact same mailing list that they utilized, so we use that same list to notify all the property owners for the action that the board is considering today. So that notification did go out. It was also advertised in the newspaper for today.
So I understand this area more than I do the other areas because this is, like you said, one side of the street that's more compatible for this, but the northern part, I know there's the other items 2, 3, and 4. I think that's where there's some of the concerns. Not all those residents of Maryville Circle, Unity, off of Broadway were notified properly by either party, and that's what I'm questioning. And also, if this failed here today, what action takes? Is there any action that the city could take then? Is like a forced taking of annexation, or will it die here today? Richard, you want to respond to that?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Richard, go ahead.
The section of statute that's under consideration this morning has 2 components. One is the voluntary annexation process through agreement with the county that's before you. The alternative is pursuant to section 171.046, B would be for the city to adopt an ordinance and adopt a obligation to conduct a referendum of the voters that will be impacted by this proposed annexation. As Mr. Loveland pointed out at the beginning of his presentation, the purpose of this section of statute is when you have an enclave such as this to provide an expedited process to eliminate cost and expense in recognizing the fact that the property under consideration is completely surrounded by city property. As I pointed out, however, the statutes do provide for an alternative process that would be conducted by the city at greater expense perhaps, and certainly more time and effort, because it would involve a referendum of the residents to be affected and the adoption of an ordinance by the city. There is an alternative remedy.
Great, thank you. So currently, Dave, like you said before, they're already retaining city water at the city water rate and solid waste, but they're still only paying county taxes. They're not paying the city municipal taxes, correct? Correct. So that's a savings to the residents currently now that they're experiencing. Okay, thank you.
Very good. Any further questions before we move into public comment? Okay. I see no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Loveland. I'm going to go ahead and take them one at a time. Mr. County Attorney, is that how you are asking us to do this?
Yes, sir. I think that would be the most effective, given that there are 4 separate applications, 4 separate public hearings.
Excellent. Okay, very good. So item number 1, administrative agenda item number 1 is the one that I'll call for public comment on. I don't have any cards that reference item number 1 on the administrative agenda. Does anybody want to speak on this specific item number 1 on the administrative agenda, the Marvez Street? Okay, seeing no speakers, then I'll close public comment. Does the board wish to make a motion? We have a motion for approval from Commissioner Sandelli. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Greenwell. Very good. Do we have any discussion on this item? Okay, I see no discussion on this item. Are there any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. All right, please introduce number 2. Thank you, Mr. Loveland.
You're welcome. Number 2, excuse me, is, well,
This would be Unity Ave.
Unity Ave. This is actually 2 parcels that are near Central, just west of Central Avenue, as you see on there. Again, the impacts would be more or less the same. This Unity Avenue, Earl Road, and the Maravilla annexations, the next 3, all are part of an MSTU to help pay for the fire services. So they're assessed an MSTU. So the motions related to these 3 have an additional component that directs staff to pursue eliminating that MSTU, so they end up not being double charged once they're assessed by the city for the fire services if they get annexed. The other 2, when we get to those, also have some county maintained roads within the boundaries of those, and those would revert to the city. The city's agreed to take over maintenance responsibility for those roads and the drainage systems for those as part of that action for the next 2.
Very good. All right, Commissioners, on the Unity Ave item, number 2 on the administrative agenda, do we have any questions?
Look forward to public comment.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Pendergrass. All right, at this time, I'll call for public comment. I have several cards that were turned in that referenced items 2 through 4. So I'll just run through the names. If this is one you want to speak on, please feel free to come up. The first speaker would be Debbie Jordan, followed by Marilyn Aladio. Good morning.
Do you want me to speak on 2 to 4? Or
If you'd like, I'm going to give you a chance to speak on each one if you'd like, so.
Okay, well, if I'm speaking on Debbie Jordan for the record, good morning. Thank you for allowing me to come up here and speak. I'm speaking on behalf of the community. I have been there for 35 years plus in that community. We have been with the city since the inception, probably 70 years now.
Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Jordan. Marilyn Aladio, and then after that will be Herbert Nowak. Good morning.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Aladio. I've been in this community on Pine View, as you can see on the map there, Pine View. I've been there for 33 years. I was kind of shocked because I heard that they tried to annex it before, years ago, before I moved into the neighborhood. I've been in the neighborhood for 33 years, and they won the case. But everybody in my neighborhood, when I talked to them, I never got no certified letter. Like you talk about a certified letter that we all got, we didn't get that. And I just got this like a couple of weeks ago, this letter, and us neighbors, we talked about it, and we were totally against the annexing, because if we were annexed into the city, our taxes, we're the working class, our taxes would jump from a few hundred up to a few thousand, and we're having a hard time just paying our mortgage. So it put a real strain on all our neighbors, which forces us to move out of this neighborhood. And where would we go to afford our housing? Here we've been here all our lives, and now we're forced out because you guys want to annex us in, and our taxes would be astronomical. And we've been doing fine for, I've been there for 33 years. I've never had any issues. I don't need no city to come in and help us. We've been doing just fine without the city. So this annexing, a lot of us neighbors are totally opposed to it, and we did not get that certified letter that you're talking about. And that 41 is supposed to be, state or whatever, and we don't have any issues with going into our cities, so I don't understand why we have to be annexed in, because we're not having any issues with services. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments this morning. At this time, I'll call Herbert, followed by Shirley Kreiser.
Good morning. My name is Herbert Nowak. I live in the Maravilla area, and I also have rentals in there. This doesn't need to happen. Also, I look at this as not an enclave due to the fact that the Maravilla district here ties to US 41, which is not just a city street. It's a state highway and a federal highway. So technically, the way they read the way I read, I think it's a technical enclave says you have to go through city to get to the enclave. But being it's a multi-jurisdictional, I don't have to go through just a city street to get to it. Also, this is going to be a financial burden on the taxpayers due to the way the city charges for the extra millages for the city services. We already got a sheriff. We got the city fire. I pay for that. And then there's the question of the utility tax, which is on all the services, which the city charges and the county doesn't. We need to get to where this is unnecessary. People are happy the way it is. I've got renters that are limited on income. They can only afford so much. I can only pass so much through to them. I've got the sheriff. A lot of times the city cops show up if there's a problem. And then if we need to wait for the sheriff, we wait for the sheriff. But, and so, I mean, to me, it's not an advisable move. And, you know, in things like this, basically, people or property owners don't want to be to me, I should say, correction. To me, this is a land grab by the city. But I really believe that the city should have asked all the property owners beforehand, before questions. So if you got a board of 5 or 6 people over there, just taking it upon themselves to decide what's good before even, this is the only time we're having an opportunity to speak, you know. So I would appreciate if you would reject this application from the city and send it back to the voters, let them do all the work, and then go from there. Thank you.
For your comments, Mr. Miller. Order, please. Order, please. So this isn't a sports game. We don't have an applause meter here that we make our decisions based off of. So it's really important when you're in a hearing like this to actually preserve a sense of decorum so that nobody feels intimidated to share their point of view if they happen to disagree. So I'd ask you to please not applaud after the speakers. But thank you. I'm going to make sure everybody gets a fair chance to speak. Shirley Kreiser?
Yes, Shirley Kreiser. I'm sorry, sir. I have a speech disability,
okay,
so I can't talk very loud. But I live right on the corner of Raymond and Broadway. I have been there 28 years, and I bought my home specifically because it was not in the city. I used to live in the city. My sewer charges were horrendous. They made it hard to pay rent. And I'm just a simple homeowner. All I want to do is stay exactly as I am, which is Lee County unincorporated. I'm happy. Our services and needs are met, like he said, at the Sheriff's Department. We have no problem getting them out there, and I've had a lot living on a corner. But I don't want anything to do with the city. I don't want their sewer charges. I don't want their water charges. I don't want their taxes. So if we're to be considered, that's the way I feel. And if they change it, I may have to sell my home and go somewhere else. No, thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Kreiser, for your comments this morning. All right, that concludes the comment cards that I have. Does anybody else wish to speak in public comment on any of this? Yes, please come forward, and when you get to the podium, please say your name for the record. Yes, very good. I'll take it from you. Thanks so much. This is Brianna Youngkness.
My name is Brenna Youngkness. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I live at 3008 Broadway. I bought that home specifically because it was in the county as well. I cannot afford to live anywhere else. So if you were to take that and the taxes were to go up, it would be devastating to me. I, excuse me, I'm really nervous. I volunteer and I work in the community, and I would hate to leave. But if you were to take it, it probably would force me out. So I ask you, please consider not doing this. And I did not get a letter as well as everybody. I only got this letter, which told me to come here today, which is dated for this year. So I was not informed of any of this until this beginning of this year. So I ask you, please, sirs, please consider not doing this. I would like to stay in this community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Very good. Does anybody else wish to speak in public comment on this? Yes, go ahead. Yeah. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Marcia Ellis. I'm listening to members of the community speak up about increases to taxes and utilities that could impact them regarding an annexation of a community that they've lived in for decades in some cases. But there's also another untold story here, which is the impacts on their flood insurance. So we know that the community rating system for the city of Fort Myers is at an 8, and that prior to Hurricane Ian, that through the community rating system, unincorporated Lee County was at a 5. So in addition to the increased taxes and utilities and potentially disruption of services, you could add on to that a 15% at minimum increase to the flood insurance based on changing from unincorporated Lee, which enjoys more of an insurance reduction than the city of Fort Myers. So I'm just bringing that point forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Very good. All right, I'll call for any final speakers on the on item. Yes, sir, come forward.
Hello, John Emerson, 2042 Marvell Circle. I've lived there since November of '99. I would ask for a 3 to 4 year moratorium be placed on the annexation of the enclaves. We just went through the hurricane, a lot of blue tarps, a lot of damage. And we know that the taxes are going to go up if this gets approved. We need some time to get back to, get it back on our feet, get back to getting back. And we really need some more time on this. We know the taxes are going to go through the roof. And we can't afford that. This isn't Gulf Harbor. We just don't have the money for this. So thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Very good. All right. I still have no further comment cards. He'll get one turned in for the record. Does anybody else wish to speak on this item then? Okay, I see no further speakers, so I'll close public comment. And we're still on item number 2, the Unity Ave portion. At this time, we'll return back to the board for any questions or discussion.
I have a question for the county attorney.
Commissioner Pendergrass?
County attorney, would it be best if there was a motion for denial, or would it be best for this lack of any type of motion, this fails the lack of a motion? What action would be required for this request?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. County Attorney.
Given that the item presented to you is in the context of a public hearing seeking a determination, if the board is inclined to approve, they should entertain a motion to do so. If they are in a position to decline, they should indicate that by motion and vote as well. I do not believe that no action by the board would either resolve the situation or provide the community with the final outcome that they seek this morning. So we would respectfully request a motion, either affirmative or negative.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. One of my concerns, seems pretty obvious, is that it seems like the community feels, whether they were or not, feels that they were not properly notified. I have concern with that, so I just wanted to let you know I am concerned the fact that these residents maybe weren't properly informed. So at this time, I feel like they should be given that opportunity.
Very good. Any further questions or comments?
Yeah, if I could, could make a motion. I make a motion to deny the item based upon the community input and the lack of participation by the residents.
Okay, so we have a motion for denial from Commissioner Pendergrass. Do we have a second for that motion?
I will second.
Second from Commissioner Greenwald. Do we have discussion on the motion?
I think so.
Okay. I see no discussion on the motion then. I'll go ahead and call the question. Are there any objections? Okay, no objections. That motion carries unanimously. All right, let's move to item number 3.
Commissioners, the Earl Road annexation is the next one that you can see down just below the Maryville area here. This is 30 parcels, 8.7 acres between US 41 and Broadway and between Earl Road and Carroll Road. And, you know, the situation is essentially the same as what we outlined for Unity in terms of the transition. The motion includes doing away with the MSTU if the annexation were to happen, or remove them from it. And the cities, or the roads within there, including a section of Broadway, would become city maintenance responsibility.
Anybody have a question for Mr. Loveland before he sits down?
So Dave, we see the map here. This is all continuous together. So it goes from Broadway to 41, from Earl Road south to Carroll Road. There's one business on the corner there. I'm trying to remember what that business is there in the corner. Do you remember what that is on the corner of Earl? It's like an old car wash, I believe, or something?
Yeah, I can't remember if it's a car wash, I believe.
Okay, thank you. And I was also, not for this item, but for other items, concerned about the churches in the area too, but we'll listen for public comment for this.
Mr. Loveland, before you move away, so we're talking specifically on item number 3 about the teal piece, the Earl Road piece. Okay. The green piece was the one that we just declined to do?
That was Unity Ave.
Okay, and then the red at the very bottom was the one that we approved?
That was the one you approved. And so the last one that'll come up later is the larger one.
Is the larger one. Okay, very good. All right, so specifically related to the teal piece, this is item number 3. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak in public comment on that? I have the cards and I could go through them again, but would the speakers, would you just raise your hand if the speakers would like to speak again, and then I'll call through the cards. Okay, so Ms. Jordan, go ahead and please come forward, and then Mr. Nowak, you'll be next.
Thank you. Again, Debbie Jordan for the records. When we're looking at this diagram again, on Broadway, if you look at, it doesn't show the connection, but there is definitely, that is county. The Broadway is still connected to Earl. On this picture is not showing that. But if you go on the street, you absolutely see that. And I'm speaking on behalf of Earl to please oppose that. My niece and family live over there as well. They've been there for many years, and they're feeling the same thing that everybody else is about the taxes, and they would have to sell the house. And just a pure fact that we were not included, and I did have a question, well, it's not a question, a statement, that it stated that on the 7th of March, this was signed, but on the documentation that I received from you all, that I came and received, it says March 16th. So there's a difference of the dates as far as when the city approved it and what shows up here. But please, I'm going to ask you to please consider to throw Earl with the rest of the community, because they feel the same way. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Mr. Nowak, and then if anybody else wishes to speak on the Earl Road item, please just line up at the door and I'll call you forward.
Good morning, this is Herbert Nowak again. As Debbie was saying, and it's out there on the side of the road where it says City of Fort Myers limit, you know, where the city starts and stops. What your picture doesn't show there is that, and I believe it's correct, is that Broadway is county all the way to Carroll Road. So technically, that's the interconnect between the Maravilla district and the Earl Road district. And that when you add those acreages together, it comes up over the limit to do this automatic annexation. in this manner, that it would have to go in front of the voters in the district. So that's something that we need to make sure that gets clarified. Because if with those connected together, we shouldn't even have to be here today. And I hope that the few others, I know that I support the other speakers that were here, and I hope that this board does the right thing like they did with the other one and decline this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any further comments on the Teal portion, item number 3, the Earl Road annexation? Okay, I see no further public comment. I'll come back to the board for discussion. Any questions or discussion, or does somebody wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion as the prior one to deny based upon public participation of unwillingness to be part of the city annexation.
Okay, so we have a motion for rejection from Commissioner Pendergrass. Do we have a second? Second from Commissioner Ruane. Do we have any discussion on that? Okay, I see no further discussion. Are there any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. Okay. Please, Mr. Loveland, introduce item number 4.
Yes, sir, Commissioner. Item 4 is the Maravilla area annexation, the larger area in the middle of the picture. It is 195 parcels on 104 acres. And as you can see, it's between 41 and Hanson Street and carries down to almost to Earl Road. To clarify, the county does maintain Broadway from Hanson down to Carroll Road. The Earl Road map that the city provided did show the boundary carrying over. We didn't show that on this map, but it didn't make, there is a small section that's in the city, but it doesn't make sense for that short stretch for the city to maintain that one piece of it versus the county. So the county maintains that whole section, but all of that would revert to city responsibility if the annexations eventually happen.
What questions do we have for Mr. Loveland or our staff on this one? So this is the purplish color that we're talking about, the larger section.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so very good. Any questions, commissioners? Seeing none, we'll move to public comment then. At this time, I'd like to ask, would you raise your hands if you wish to speak in public comment on this one? Okay, I see Ms. Youngkness and then Ms. Jordan after her.
Thank you for allowing me to speak again. I'm sorry, I'm confused. I've never been to one of these things. This is my section. This is where I live. Again, please don't do this. I bought it. I bought the property because it was in this particular area and I could afford it and I want to stay there. And I did not get a letter. So all that stuff again, and I'm sorry. I spoke, the map was up and I thought it was my areas earlier, so I'm sorry, but please don't do this, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. At this time, Ms. Jordan, I'll call you. And anybody else, if you'll just line up right at the door and I'll bring you forward.
Thank you. Again, I apologize that I keep coming up here. However, this is the area where I have lived for 35 years, raised my children, and in speaking with the neighbors and walking, last night on Grace Avenue, everyone came out of their house to try to figure out what is taking place. However, they could not be here because, of course, they have to work. So, people are here from the community to speak for the people who cannot be here to speak to all of you in regards to opposing this annexation. Again, I can't say that they did not send out the first letter. I never received that, never seen it. But this one right here, as soon as it hit our doors, we acted on it immediately, trying to contact the city, contacting the county, trying to figure out what does that mean for us. I even sent a letter to the city council on the 30th to find out with questions on it, how does this affect the people who live there? How does it affect the people who are on set incomes? What does that look like to us as residents? I've not yet received anything back on that. But I will tell you, They are highly opposed of this, and we have no problem with the county. We love being in the county, and we appreciate if you will continue your support with the community and the families there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Let's call Mr. Nowak forward. Okay. And then it'll be Mr. Emerson afterwards.
It's Mr. Herbert Nowak again. I live in that area, and I also have rentals in that area. And this would affect what I would have to charge my tenants, because some of them are on fixed income. And I mean, that runs back to the cost of services. You know, I understand services costs go up, but to me, some of the city services are too high. And it makes me think sometimes about how many other people that live in the city may not want to be part of the city anymore and joining back with the county. You know, we could have de-annexations, you know, or from the city, or even a de-incorporation of the city based on if there's enough public support for that. If things like this continue to happen, those things could happen. I mean, people don't want to pay more for services than they have to. I mean, the boards are supposed to be here to represent the people and to do what's best for the people. And the thing is, right now, fire service, the tax has gone up 3 times in the city in the past 3 years. And there's no need for that to continue. And the same thing with the other taxes. So I'm not happy about any of these annexations. So I hope this, if it just gets turned down today, and if it needs to go to the voters, there'll be support to continue it the way it is. And maybe we'll get some other voters in the area to join up with us. And then, so then we'll have a bigger enclave, or perhaps from the river all the way down to the county line down by the airport. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Emerson, and then Ms. Eladio, I see you. I'll have you right after Mr. Emerson.
Sorry, I spoke out of turn a moment ago. I meant to speak on where we're at now with the Marville area. I talked about a moratorium before. I think that would be a great idea if we had to. Like Herb was saying, this feels like a tax grab, a land grab. We cannot afford high taxes. I know the taxes are going to triple, quadruple, I don't know, with this annexation. And then a lot of us were on septic, and they talked about bringing city sewer through, which, if you know what happened over in the Cape, it was tens of thousands of dollars to hook into the utilities over there. And I know that's going to happen to all of us whenever that gets proposed. But I'd ask that you guys turn this down for now. It's too much on the taxes. It would really burden all of us, and I'd hate to leave. I'd hate to move away. Since I've been living there since '99, I'd hate to try to find somewhere else to live, because it would just be way too much on all of us. And like I said, we had the hurricane go through, and we still got lots of damage, a lot of blue roofs that need to be fixed, and this is not the time. I'd ask that if anything, just kick this down the road a little bit until we get ourselves back on our feet. And thank you for your cooperation. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Emerson. All right, Ms. Eladio?
Yes, I've been in that area for the last 33 years, and I just feel like we've been hoodwinked by not being notified by a certified letter that was just brought up this morning. We just got this letter a couple of weeks ago, and it put a financial burden. I'm a senior citizen, 68 years old, and I'm on a tight budget, and a lot of us in this neighborhood are the working class, And that would put a lot of pressure on a lot of families, a lot of stress, it would not work in the best interest of our neighborhoods. It's not. It would be working against the interest of our neighborhood, because we've been doing just fine without the city all these years, and all of a sudden, I just feel like they're just throwing this on because they want more money for the city. I just don't think it's fair, because the reason why we are there is because we want a peace of mind and quiet and not to be micromanaged by the city. And if we're annexed in, we're going to be micromanaged, and that's not what we want. We relish our privacy, and I am totally opposed against this annexation. And all my neighbors, every one of them that you talk to on that street are not for the annexation. We are totally against it, because we know what this means. This means we're getting priced out of where we're living. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak in public comment on this item? Yes, please come forward, Mr. Schottmiller, and state your name for the record.
William Joseph Schottmiller. I agree with what they're saying. You know, there's a lot of working poor, and I noticed throughout the years a lot of these apartment complexes have been picked up, and there's more people homeless because there are people on fixed income. As I've said, there's a woman that is pushing a cart, living under an umbrella because she can't afford to live anywhere. There's a lot of them like that. They're on fixed income, they're elderly, they're either disabled physically or mentally, some people. They're the working poor that can't afford. So landlords, I'm glad to hear that this landlord wants to keep his renters and keep the rent down, you know? We need people, and we need places for people to go that they can afford. And they're in a comfortable position right now, I guess. So we don't need to harm them by making them have to leave and sell their places or whatever. We need affordable housing, and we need other places like the lands that are available, like I asked. So look forward to working with all of you, city and county. Thank you.
Any further questions, or any further public comment on this? Okay, seeing no further public comment, I'll close public comment and back to the board for discussion or motion.
I just want to go ahead and say, if I could, say thank you for everybody being here today, and thank you for the city of Fort Myers being here. And I understand why we're here, and that's why I supported the first item earlier with Maravez, because that's such an isolated area down there. But we all have to admit this is logistically can be a nightmare. Myself and the mayor and Council Streets and even Danny Beller of the fire department over the years, it's always been logistically a nightmare for the city and the county to service this area. But they've always done a good job servicing the area. I don't care if it was either City of Fort Myers or Tice would respond to calls for joint interlocal agreements, or the City of Fort Myers or the Sheriff's Department work together. My concern is, though, as we've heard today from the speakers, is the extra burden put on people this time. Right now, critically, is affordable housing is really an issue across the state of Florida, and to just change something like this where there's going to be a significant increase of people's cost of living daily and weekly and yearly, I hate to see that impose that. This will probably happen sometime in the future, but at this time I don't think it's the right time. Like we heard some of the property owners say about the storm damages. Again, people are on fixed incomes. They're living there because they can afford to be there. That's why they're there. They chose to be there all these 33 years and with these costs. And they're still getting services. They're getting city water. They're paying the city rate. But that extra few line items with the taxation and your difference you would see with your taxes for your liability insurance and home insurance, there is a difference there, and I hate to impose that on the people. So I hope the city understands my position with this is the unforeseen burden we'd be putting on the taxpayers and the residents. So that's my reason, again, for making a motion to deny this based upon the residents' participation of denial.
Okay, so motion to deny from Commissioner Pendergrass, second from Commissioner Ruane. Any further discussion on that? Commissioner Sandelli, you're recognized.
You know, I understand, kind of like when we do the 2020 program, when we can aggregate properties that are already next to properties that we manage, it's easier to operate that way. However, the bottom line, as was stated here today, that doesn't seem to be the case here, you know, and I agree that undue burden right now is probably not the right time to impose this, so I'll go along with the motion.
Any further comments, or?
Yeah, Chairman, if I may, I feel the same way. I'm not saying that this isn't the right thing in the future, but right now just doesn't seem the right time to do this. I like the idea of thinking about a moratorium to give it some time, and I would like the public to make sure that or at least on our end, to make sure that they're notified properly. If they were or were not, I do not know that, but at this time, I feel the same way. It's just not the proper time.
Very good. Any further discussion? All right, I see no further discussion, and we have a motion on the floor, so I'll call the question. Are there any objections to the motion? I see none. That motion carries unanimously. All right, thank you very much. Mr. Harner, please introduce item number 5 on the administrative agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is to approve request for 11 new DCD positions, and I'm going to ask Mr. Loveland to address the item.
Morning again, Commissioners. David Loveland, Community Development. This is a request for a mid-year budget adjustment to authorize the addition of 11 new positions for community development. As we've outlined in the agenda item and we've discussed previously, the permitting volumes that we're dealing with these days are through the roof, so to speak. The latest numbers as of yesterday, we still have over 15,500 permits already active in our system right now. And we've reduced the number waiting to come in, so it's less than 7,000 now. We're down to about 6,500. You know, the inspections, we're scheduling 1,300 a day at this point. We're able to perform about 1,000 a day. We still have phone calls, emails, lobby customers coming in every day. We have ended our Wednesday closures of our office to process permits. We're going to continue to be open from now on because the benefit that we got from that was overwhelmed by the boomerang effect, the number of people that came in the next day because they couldn't come in on Wednesdays. And so we weren't really making true progress in that sense. Just to put on the record the various activities that we've been doing to try to address this, it starts with overtime. We have a lot of our employees working overtime to try to help address the needs. We are reallocating internal resources, so we have people from other sections of DCD that are now assisting our permitting section. And in fact, I just heard today we're getting some people from public safety to help us as well. You know, we had gone out through the state to ask for assistance from other jurisdictions. Hillsborough County did respond and provided us 2 building inspectors for a 7-day week. Twice they've done that, so that's been helpful. We're contracting with outside services, so we're contracting for private providers for some building inspectors, and we've hired through temp agencies some people to assist us in our permitting section. And all of that helps, but the bottom line is we just need more bodies to be able to address this. And so the request for the 11 positions is 6 new positions in our building inspection section and 5 in our permitting section to assist with the intake and the processing of permits. The building inspectors come with a need for trucks, so the request also includes authorization to purchase six new F-150s to go with that. And we discovered one of the reasons the cost amount changed on the recap sheet is because we found out the trucks are more expensive than they were the last time we bought some. So, so that was the adjustment. And the budget figures that are identified would be funded out of our building permit fee fund. We have about $13 million in our reserves at this point in time, so it would come from there.
Excellent. Commissioners, what questions do you have for Mr. Loveland? All right, I see none. Just, you know, briefly, Mr. Loveland, I appreciate everything that you and the team at Community Development are doing. You're certainly overwhelmed with the amount of permits in relation to Hurricane Ian and all the other great activity that we have here in Lee County, and appreciate the work that they're going through every day to get us caught up. I think this is a wise move to bring forward 11 new positions, and And I thank you for bringing this forward. The one question I would ask before we get into discussion or public comment is how quickly do you think you'll be able to bring them on, train them? Do you have an average ballpark time frame of when we could expect to really see an impact?
We'll advertise them right away once we get approval. We've already got it set up so that we can jump right into that. The 5 positions for permitting, we should be able to fill in a matter of a few weeks. Those are easier positions to fill. There's less requirements. The building inspectors will take a little longer because there's special certifications that are required, so it's a more limited pool of potential applicants. But I think within a couple of months, we should be able to have those positions filled as well.
Excellent. Very good. Any other questions then before we move to public comment? Commissioner Sandelli?
No, I agree. My concern, because of the pressure the department has been under, the good news is the activity's out there, so we're moving in the right direction. The challenge is filling that. And augmenting this, I think, is exactly the right move in interim places. My concern has always been, you work these people too hard, they finally say, I've had enough. Then we go in the other direction. So I think that this is a good move. It'll certainly approve it.
All right, very good. Well, at this time, I'll call for public comment on item number 5, the request to add 11 new DCD positions. Do we have anybody who's here to speak in public comment today? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Does somebody wish to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion for approval from Commissioner Greenwell, second from Commissioner Ruane. Do we have any further discussion on that? Okay, I see no further discussion. Are there any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. Mr. Harner, please introduce item number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please, this is to ratify emergency expenditures executed under Lee County Emergency Resolution, and I'd like to ask Mr. Winton to address this item.
Commissioners, these are emergency purchase orders that were opened immediately following Hurricane Ian under the state of emergency. These items are best described as emergency work and encompass everything from fuel, debris removal, temporary fixes for roads, traffic signals, county buildings, and the utility system, to staffing and food for first responders. Many of these vendors have pre-positioned contracts with the county that were procured under federal guidelines, and scopes and task orders are assigned to their contracts to begin the emergency response. All of these costs are eligible for FEMA reimbursement. And just one thing to note is the amount of the purchase orders are a best estimate at the time, and in many cases, the amount spent will be lower than the not-to-exceed amounts.
Commissioners, any questions for our staff? Yeah, Commissioner Ruane.
I recognize the bulk of these are relative to solid waste. My problem with this is the purchase order process we go through. You issue a purchase order. I've tried to track some of the documentation associated with it. The purchase order is basically a promise for us to be able to pay up to that dollar amount any bills that come in. And the problem is that it's been 4 months, didn't see the actual purchase orders, just actually received them the other day. And to me, it's just not adequate documentation. And if we've given powers to our county manager, that's fine, but I have a problem ratifying something and trying to trace something. A purchase order to me is the first step in making a promise to a contractor or a vendor. Yes, and there's a contract, and I've read the task order contract on a particular vendor, and I'm going to have a problem ratifying these. I just don't like the process where we issue a purchase order. Because once we ratify $273 million in purchase orders, we basically essentially have approved the expenditure of $273 million, even though we've only spent $33 million. And I understand bills going to come in the future, but some of these purchase orders were signed 4 months ago, and I don't understand we couldn't have received them in a more timely manner. So I'm not going to ratify these.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ruane. Any further questions or for the staff before we take public comment?
Yeah, I have public comment on it, or a comment on it, I should say. I feel the same way. I see where it says here, board ratification required an emergency purchase of over $100,000 or more. So I feel like, obviously this was a unprecedented emergency that we had upon us, so we had to make decisions. But I do feel like in the future, the board should be better notified and be more involved in this kind of dollars that are being spent. Even though they're reimbursable, I still feel like we should have gotten a little better notice up front. But overall, I understand why we had such emergency that we needed to do what we did. But I do feel like that there could have been better communication.
Very good. What other questions do we have for the staff before we take public comment? Okay. At this time, let me call for public comment on this item, and then we'll come back to the board for motions and discussion. Has anybody come to speak in public comment on item number 6? Okay. I see none, so we'll close public comment. We'll come back to the board for motions or discussion.
A question for the county manager.
Commissioner
So Dave, I don't know if it's for you or Pete, can you give us like a little timeline? I understand that there's a 4-month period. So all the different, everything from, road repairs to debris pickup, is that attached to this item in the blue sheet and the original backup material? Is that information there for that?
Yes.
We want to go back and look at that I think we went over that last week in my one briefing. So is that information, all the information as far as the dates, the services dates, and when it was approved by the county manager based upon the state of emergency? Would that be Pete?
Yes, Commissioners. There's a detailed list of each vendor, what the purchase order was for that vendor based on the specific task order or the specific specific services, scope of services. So, under Granger, you've got air horns, building inspection, then batteries for EOC restock, batteries for Pottorf shelter. There's a whole list of that that's attached to this agenda item.
So if I wanted
And
to
also
go back,
what I send out to y'all with the financial dashboard, each week, it shows every invoice that we've paid up to this point.
okay, so this for the process reasons, does it go through our procurement first because it goes to Haggerty for reimbursement, or does it go to Haggerty first and back to our staff and procurement for billing and for reporting reasons?
It goes to procurement, and then Haggerty also reviews it.
Okay. So the initial step is through our staff, to Mary's office, and then it goes back from there, it goes to Haggerty. Okay, great, thank you.
I guess my point of the is there's 26 pages attached, and there's no doubt about it. It's $273 million. It's then obviously issued. But a purchase order is a promise to pay. There's no underlying contract behind the purchase order to actually understand what we signed a purchase order for. Yes, there's individual items listed down. I just, 4 months later, have a problem, and that's why I have the issue, is documentation to go back to the task order itself, to then go back to the PO. You approve a purchase order today, although only $33 million has been spent, we basically are ratifying that $273 million can be spent. So a purchase order is a promise to pay. Amount spent is what's been spent. There's still $240 million worth of purchase orders that haven't been spent. And I don't have the backup to go back to the purchase order. I have some details, line items, but I don't have the origin of the contract. That's why, as a commissioner, I have a problem approving this.
If nobody else has any questions, I would like to ask a question to our county attorney, if that's okay. So, Mr. Wesch, one question that I had. So, is this similar to the other situations where we've had to ratify things where this is mainly ceremonial in nature, or what is the effect of if these weren't ratified?
Mr. Chairman, board members, I would ask that you keep in context today's agenda item. And Commissioner Ruane, I certainly understand your concerns about backup material and supporting documentation. But in terms of context, please recall that these expenditures have already been authorized. They were authorized by the county manager pursuant to authority granted to him under both county ordinance and Chapter 252 Florida statutes. So these are debts that are already incurred. So we would respectfully request that you ratify the county manager's actions so that there are no concerns with regard to the payment of those amounts for services already provided. If there's a concern about documentation related to this item, I think they can certainly be met by county staff, as well as a commitment to additional documentation and communications going forward. But given the emergency nature of the county's response to this hurricane, the county manager had to act in order to protect health, safety, welfare of our residents with limited opportunity for input, and had to react quickly to protect the health, safety, welfare. So the expenditures have already taken place. This is a ratification of your county manager's actions in safeguarding the people and property of Lee County.
Thank you, Mr. Wesh. But so just again, to kind of put a finer point on it, what would be the effect of not doing it?
I think at that point, we might draw some auditor's comments by either the clerk or the external auditor, and it might jeopardize the reimbursability under the federal guidelines, the latter of which I would hesitate to comment further in an open meeting. And if that's a concern of the board, I would address you individually on that so as to not create a factual predicate that might harm the county in the future.
Thanks, Mr. Wesh. That answers my question. Commissioner Ruane?
I understand the authority we gave the county manager, and I supported 100%. That's not a question. A purchase order is an amount promised. Money spent is money spent. Also listened to the chief financial officer indicate that it would not exceed, that dollar amount could be lower. But yet we're authorizing a purchase order. We're not authorizing expenditure, a purchase order. And that's my problem. I don't think whether I ratify that or not precludes what the county manager did. It's no different than what we did with Crowder Golf. I struggled with that process as well. The ratification at that point in time was one that was fine. We gave the powers to the county manager, and I still stick with giving him the powers. I don't have an issue with that whatsoever. The ratification is, in all due respect, as someone that's followed the accounting field, there's not adequate documentation to support the $273 million. There's 26 pages that show individual line items. There's not a contract to support each item of general fund or library or MSTU or all hazards or solid waste. There's not a contract to support that item. So that's what I was looking for. If you want to defer and get me those contracts, I can certainly ratify at some point in time, but I don't have those contracts that total $273 million. All I have is some disbursements and purchase orders lying down. That's my problem. I would more than Mr. Chair have no problem deferring this, but I can't, in good conscience, without the contract to verify the PO that was issued, the supporting, I can't move forward with this.
Would you like to make that as a motion?
I'd love to make a motion that we just get adequate support to back up the purchase order with the contract that was executed, so we can see it. We as county commissioners are responsible for $100,000 expenditures. And I don't question what we did. I would just like to vote on $273 million and see contracts to verify that. That's all.
Okay, so the motion is to defer and to request specific backup information from the staff?
Contracts that would support the 273, yes, 273 million.
Very good. And that motion is from Commissioner Ruane. Do we have a second for that motion?
I have a question to the county attorney. Would that jeopardize?
Before we jump into discussion on the motion, do we have a second for it? I'll second it for the purpose of discussion then, so that it can stay alive. And then, yes, Commissioner Pendergrass, you're recognized.
For the county attorney, does that jeopardize us, if it harms the county in any way for the delay of this?
Mr. Chairman?
Ratifying?
Yes, Mr. County Attorney.
Not that I am aware of at this point, no, sir. And the deferral is certainly better than a denial.
And I'd just like to say, maybe if there is something we need to do differently, then I'd love to hear from my colleagues what we could do differently to satisfy your concerns about the process of that. Do we need to meet daily to go over the items being approved every day, or do we need to meet every other day? What do we need to do to make you feel comfortable to what staff is doing under the current charter?
Very good. Commissioner Ruane and then Commissioner Greenwell, you have a comment as well?
I don't think there's a frequency that's necessary. It's just adequate support that you receive. And again, I've been not on the county commission as you all have, but been involved in government for 16 years and used to getting documentation. I don't have a problem with anything. I just would like the support for each item as it's listed here in the purchase order. That's it. There's a contract that was signed for $11 million. I'd like a copy of the contract. We have it. We're great. I don't think that's anything other than what I'm asking for. I don't need to meet more frequently. The contract that I selected was signed October 8th. It's February 7th. 4 months. You know, it says reasonable period of time. I would question whether 120 days is reasonable. That's all. I just want to see the contracts. That's my point.
Okay, Commissioner Greenwell?
I wanted to ask Pete if it's okay. Is that something that you can provide in a pretty timely fashion, what he's asking? I guess that's my question is.
Yes, we will do that.
Okay, very good. Does that answer your question? Very good. Any further questions? The one comment I had and question I had was just looking at the timeline of everything. So, you know, obviously landfall happens under a state of emergency. We empowered the county manager to take these actions, which I think are fully appropriate actions, right? This is what you got to do. You're cleaning up probably the worst disaster that the state of Florida has ever seen. So I certainly understand why things were done the way they were done. The question I do want to ask, though, is why did it take 4 months for it to come to us for ratification? Why couldn't we have called a meeting much quicker, or that first meeting after the hurricane when many of these purchase orders were put out? Why not do it then? I guess that's my question. Could somebody maybe give me some answer or context on that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Pete, would you like to go ahead and answer that?
Commissioners, we typically have batched these in previous storms that we've been involved with. So if it's the will of the board, we can bring these more on a piecemeal basis. You know, I do want to say that the purchase order and then the invoice, the purchase order, you do a purchase order. Then you get a scope for any work that's done under that purchase order. There's a scope for all work done under that purchase order. And then ultimately you will receive invoices. And the invoices come much later because the vendors understand, as well as Hagerty, that the documentation has to be adequate to receive FEMA reimbursement. And that's why the invoicing lags quite a bit behind both the purchase order and then the scope and task order that is under each specific purchase order.
Okay.
The 250 million of this is debris. 24 million is the rest of the emergency work we did. Of purchase orders, we haven't spent that much. And right now for the debris, our best estimate at this time is 156 million, not 250 million.
Mr. Witten, thank you. I appreciate that. And if I may, I'm going to ask a follow-up question that we talked about during my briefing too, was just, can you explain, so we're opening it up for 273.5 million as purchase orders, but there are safeguards in place to make sure that people don't just say, hey, I've got this amount that I can spend. What are those safeguards that are in place?
I'd ask our procurement director, Mary Tucker, to come up to help me with that. But there's a lot of checks and balances involved with this. What the contractors just can't do anything they want to under a purchase order. They're monitored and by county staff to make sure that the work they're doing is what we wanted them to do. And they just can't invoice for anything either. It has to be under what county staff asked them to do. Mary?
Good morning, Mary Tucker, the Procurement Management Director. All of these invoices, as they come in, not only are they signed off by a project manager who's reviewed the work in the field, they are also signed off by the fiscal pool to make sure that they match the contract that's been issued, or in this case, also a purchase order that's been issued. And then it also goes to the clerk's office, who also reviews to make sure that it did match the contract as well. But they are reviewed in the field as well, so that the project managers are checking to make sure the work is done.
Excellent. Thanks, Ms. Tucker. Okay, very good. Commissioner Wayne, you had another comment?
I did. I don't doubt, having grown up in the accounting field, the process we go through in verifying expenses or signing off on expenses. All I'd ask for, and I don't think there should be any resistance, for the contract that supports the purchase order that was issued. I'm confident of the process we go through of verifying expenditure by the department head, the clerk who's sitting at the front desk right now. I have full faith in what he does. I read his reports very intimately. I'm just looking for the contracts to support the 273, and I recognize bulk of it is solid waste. I just really asked for, and I excluded solid waste. I just wanted the contracts to support the items. That's all I asked for. I'm not questioning the validity of the expense. I'm not questioning whether we don't have the proper procedures. We have an outside accounting firm called Clifford Larson. I mean, we have certainly the best. I just want to see, as a county commissioner, the documentation, certainly in a timely manner when we sign a purchase order.
Okay.
That would be my request.
Very good. All right, do we have any further comments then on the motion that's on the floor? So the motion on the floor is to defer with a specific request for more backup information and then have it brought back to a future meeting. The motion was by Commissioner Wayne. It was seconded by myself for further discussion. Do we have any further comments before I call the question? Commissioner Sandelli.
I just have a question. It appears from the answers here that we can get the information requested in a timely manner. Okay, does that in any way delay the process to where we get into a reimbursement situation or an issue down the line?
Very good. Mr. Harner, just if you want to answer it on the record.
No, it does not.
Okay. No, it does not. That's fine. Thank you. All right, at this time, then I'll go ahead and call the question. Are there any objections to the motion on the floor? Okay, I see no objections. That motion passes unanimously. Very good. Thank you. All right, at this time, I'd like to recognize the County Attorney's Office for the 9:30 public hearing, number 1.
Good morning, Commissioners. David Halverson, County Attorney's Office. I have all 3 of your public hearings this morning. These items have been duly advertised, and I provided the affidavits of publication to the clerk. Item number 1 is a petition to vacate the public's interest in a portion of the unimproved public utility and drainage easements located along the platted lot lines at 3107 23rd Street Southwest in Lehigh Acres. There were no objections, and staff's available for any questions.
Very good. Any questions for our County Attorney's Office? Okay, seeing none, then I'll call for public comment. Has anyone come to speak in public comment on public hearing item number 1? Okay, I see none, so we'll move back to the board. Does somebody wish to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion for approval from Commissioner Greenwell, second from Commissioner Sandelli. Do we have any further comments? Seeing none, are there any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. Please introduce item number 2.
Item 2 is also a petition to vacate the public's interest in a portion of the unimproved public utility easement centered along the common property lot line between lots 3 and 4 of the platted lots at 2007 Churchill Avenue North in Lehigh. There were no objections, and staff's available for any questions.
Okay, very good. Do we have any public comment on public hearing item number 2? Just raise your hand. I'll call you forward. I see none, so I'll close public comment. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion for approval from Commissioner Ruane. We have a second from Commissioner Pendergrass. Any further discussion? Are there any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. And item number 3, Mr. Halverson.
Item 3, also a petition to vacate. This is a petition to vacate the public's interest in a portion of the unimproved public utility easement centered along the common property lot line between lots 15 and 16 of the platted lots at 905 Abbott Avenue in Lehigh Acres. There are no objections to this petition, and staff is available for any questions.
Okay, very good. Any questions at all? Okay, I see none. Has anyone come to speak in public hearing number 3? Just raise your hand and I'll call you forward. Okay, I see no speakers. Commissioners, does somebody wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion for approval from Commissioner Greenwell. Second from Commissioner Ruane. Any further discussion? Any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Halverson. Mr. Harner, at this time, do we have any walk-ons or carryover items? We have none? Okay. At this time, I'll turn to commissioner items, and then we'll do committee appointments afterward. But commissioner items, Commissioner Greenwell, do you have anything to discuss this morning?
Yes. On the commissioner items, is that where we're at?
Yep.
As everyone knows, I've lived out by the Lee County Civic Center for the last 32 years. So I actually worked there as a kid selling drinks when they would have concerts out there. So been part of that Civic Center for a long time, a big part of my life. I drive by it many, many times every day, tens of thousands of times in my life. So it's a big asset to the county, and obviously we have some issues out there with some deterioration of buildings, and at this time we're going to have to make some decisions out of county on what we're going to do in the future with that Civic Center and the existing buildings that are out there. So at this time, I would like to, I'm asking and requesting to work with the staff as the board's liaison on a long-term plan for the Civic Center property. I would like to reaffirm my commitment to the 4-H program. I've been involved and bought many animals out there from the local kids over the years, so I'm a very big supporter of that program. I think it's a program that needs to really continue and maybe ultimately improve with the amount of people that have moved into our area. We have an opportunity here to make it bigger and better. So I'm asking the board to support me in working with the staff to decide, be the liaison to bring to the board what we're going to be able to do with that facility in the future.
That a motion, sir?
Okay. Yeah, and you're making that in the
I'm
form
making that a motion.
I'll second that.
Motion from Commissioner Greenwell, and the second is from Commissioner Ruane. Any further discussion on that at all?
I'm fully in support. I was out there this weekend with a tour with some Fair Board members, gave me a tour of the facility, where they're at, some damage from the hurricane and everything. But my question to staff is, this is great to have this discussion. We haven't heard anything lately about the Civic Center, but I know we voted last year to have an assessment of the Civic Center to all the property out there to see what their choices are we have out there, how much it needs to be improved, what should be the next, what the options are. Where are we at with that assessment as far as the engineering, the damages and everything?
I'd like to ask Chris Brady to answer that question.
Good morning, Commissioners. Yes, the engineering study, we've worked with Mark Mora and Ehab Gurgis over in Facilities Construction Management. The study is done. We did receive some additional damage out at the facility due to Hurricane Ian, so the facilities team went back out. They've made some amendments to that, and we are prepared to bring that back to you individually for briefings.
So it'd be different choices of what could happen with the whole property, all, I think it's 100 and something acres, you know, the building itself and all the parking and everything.
Yeah, the
4-H and
the direction that the board gave was for a complete engineering study of the property so that we could bring back a full assessment so that you understood the magnitude of the state of the facility. And then for the board to be able to provide us some direction on how you all would like to move forward with it.
Do we have a time for that final assessment from the group that did it?
I'm sorry.
Do we have a timeline when that's going to be done, the complete assessment?
It is done, and we're ready to start scheduling briefings for you.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Good.
Very good. All right, at this time, we do have some speakers that would like to speak in public comment on this item. So I'll call Denise Parker, followed by Shane Parker. Denise, it's okay if you wish to not speak, but you're welcome to speak. All right. I think the request was for Mr. Todd Patrick to speak. So Mr. Patrick, go ahead and come forward.
Good morning. My name is Todd Patrick. I am Vice President of a newly formed livestock program here in Lee County. The other founding members in attendance is Mr. John Johnson as the President, Mr. Monty Winslow as the Treasurer, and Ms. Denise Parker as Secretary. We are registered with the state as a corporation. We've also just received our 501c3 approval. Three of the four founding members have over 20 years experience in local livestock programs. And what I find amazing about them being a founding member of a new organization is their children have grown out of the program. They do this strictly out of the love of the kids, the livestock, the organizations. Myself, I have 6 years involved in livestock. I still have one more child to go. She'll be a senior next year. There again, I also will be staying on after my children grow out of the program, for future children to come. Basically, the mission of our organization is to provide a quality environment for the exhibitors and livestock to be sold, to be shown and sold to local loyal buyers that have been around for years. For now, our organization is going to be open to Lee, Charlotte, Collier, Henry, DeSoto, and Glades, with the intentions in the future of offering statewide registrations. Exhibitor is going to be 8 to 18 years old and enrolled in any approved state recognized educational institution. Our first show is going to be in the spring of 2024 at the Posse Arena. The Posse's been gracious enough to invite us to their facility. Our organization will consist of steers, hogs, goats, small animals. Steers and hogs will be 100% terminal with an auction for the exhibitor at the end. Small animals will also have an auction that is going to be voluntary for the exhibitors. With dates to be determined, we're planning on having prospect shows with vendors possible vendors, feed vendors showing up, maybe have a couple vets, whatever, just people involved at the prospect shows in order to further the education and help the exhibitors with their projects. Financially, our organization is going to rely on individuals and businesses for funding. Our goal is to offer this organization for these exhibitors with zero registration fees, zero cost out of their pocket other than their animal and expenditures for feed.
Thanks, Mr. Patrick. I appreciate it. And at this time, I can call the other speakers as well, but I appreciate your comments today. Okay, so it appears we had a group spokesperson speak. We have a motion on the floor that has been seconded. To the other speakers, if you wish to speak, when I call your name, you're welcome to come speak. But if you'd also like to just waive your opportunity to speak in support of the motion that's on the floor, just say I waive in support as well. Denise Parker? Waive in support of the motion on the floor. Shane Parker? Waives his time in support of the motion that's on the floor. Imani Winslow? Waives his time in support of the motion that's on the floor. Very good. We'll come back to the board at this time. Are there any other speakers? Oh, let's do Mr. Ballard and then Ms. Ellis.
I definitely am in support of everything that this board last year and all of the public forums that we had. It was pretty obvious, pretty definite that the board said, no, we don't want to give the Civic Center away. We don't want to sell it. We want to maintain it. My question would be, and I guess it would be to probably Pete, if there was hurricane damage out there, which we know there was, is some of the federal money for hurricane damage repair going to be available to help make that repair? I know the study is going to show that there's definitely money the county's going to have to spend, but if there was hurricane damage, I would sure hope that we could use some of that federal hurricane money to help further that expense.
Thanks, Mr. Ballard. And Ms. Ellis?
First of all, thank you so much, Commissioner Greenwell, for bringing forth and advocating for agriculture here in Lee County. This is a topic that's very dear to my heart and something I've been very concerned about, not fully understanding recent comprehensive plan changes and those impacts on the agricultural overlay for small farmers and small farming families throughout Lee County. As a beekeeper, I just want to point out that 15% of our nation's bees were impacted in Hurricane Ian, and that basically puts at risk our entire nation's supplies, because the pollination services for this country, the entire United States, center in our region. And whenever we go messing with the agricultural overlay in our county, we could impact the nation's food supply by not permitting those beekeepers to continue to station their bees throughout this county. So I applaud very much, Mr. Greenwell, you calling attention to the role and the legacy of agriculture in Lee County, and that we continue to not just consider the livestock, but we consider the actions of the beekeepers that are the heroes for our nation's food supply throughout this whole county, including the coastal locations, which, by the way, make the absolute best honey. If you've never had sea grape honey or mangrove honey, it is the best. And thank you for protecting the role of agriculture in our county, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak about that with you today.
Very good. Are there any further speakers? If so, just raise your hand. I'll call you forward. Okay, I see no further speakers on this. Then we'll come back to the board for further discussion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay,
I'd just like to
Sandelli?
thank you for your interest. I think it's not only a great piece of property, but I think it's an integral part of what that community will be going forward and what's delivered there, so thank you for that.
Appreciate it. Any further comments? All right, I see no further comments then on the motion that's on the floor. Are there any objections? No objections, that motion carries unanimously. All right, Commissioner Greenwell, you're up. Do you have any further comments then?
Good, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Commissioner
Thank you,
Pendergrass.
Board, for trusting me. Thank you.
Any items today? Nope, none from Commissioner Pendergrass. Commissioner Sandelli, any items today? Commissioner Ruane.
First one is Friends of Boca Community Center is a nonprofit that's been around since 1986. They've approached me as obviously the district representative, and they'd like to work closer with staff for not only the management, but operations and capital improvements that are necessary for the community center. There seems to be, and they've raised over $2 million in the past for improvements. They want to play a very active role and like support from the commission to work with staff, and they are confident that they can raise the financial support to improve the center.
Very good. Could you remind me what specific center this is again?
This is Boca Grande. Friends of Boca Grande Community Center has been around since 1986. Obviously, they would like to be much more involved in that, and also would be very active in raising the funds to financially support this.
Okay, very good. Commissioners, any questions on that? Are you making a motion?
It's a motion.
Okay.
To have them work with staff.
Motion for staff to work with the Friends of Boca Grande. Okay, very good. Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Pendergrass. Any further discussion on that? No? I'll call, since it is a motion we're going to vote on, I'll call for public comment on the Boca Grande Community Center. Okay, I see none. I'll close public comment. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none? Yeah, are there any objections? No objections, that passes unanimously.
Second item, Commissioner, you and I basically went up to Tallahassee during special session, and it was an honor to do so. As you recall, I'm not necessarily certain if all the commissioners, but they divided both areas of the Senate and the legislative branch, the Senate and the House, in resiliency committees. They appointed Ben Albritton, actually the person for the Senate, as well as Michael Grant for the House. I was asked initially to testify up there, was asked to come up. I've been asked to come up again. The resiliency committees meet on Thursday. They've asked that I come up again, opportunity to do so. I've worked very closely with Senator Albritton as well as Representative Grant in both items. Reluctantly, I can't be here for the zoning hearing tomorrow. I'm going up. There's also a new head of the DEO. Today, during special session, the DEO was given responsibilities and/or funding to allow some financial help with day-to-day bills in municipalities. With the municipalities, they have an opportunity to apply for a grant, and it's really a loan. There's a specific period of time that needs to be paid back on. I think it's prudent to go visit on behalf of some of the municipalities that were struggling with collections. Right now, it's vision that it could be paid back in 12 to 18 months. That might not be adequate enough time for them to get through 2 cycles. I'm thinking there's 2 cycles in real estate collections. I visited with Pete, and we've collected about 80% of our ad valorem. When I visited with Dana Sousa yesterday, they had only collected 40% of the ad valorem. The beach also, Fort Myers Beach, at the last time I testified, Mayor Allers actually testified and actually asked for $8 million that they would need for revenue replacement. I think it's more than prudent to meet with the Department of Economic Opportunities as Secretary Eagle has stepped down. I thought I would go there too and visit with them and talk about that. That's going to be really important to some of the smaller communities. They rely on ad valorem taxes. Just wanted to let you know that, it was certainly, Senator Albritton invited me back up, and why I'm going, if that's okay with the board, that I continue to go.
Very good.
Yeah. Thank you for going, everything you're doing, the whole thing, because we're all in this together, and it's really important that we all work together, continue.
Absolutely. I think, as Commissioner Hanna and I were up there together, we had indicated that we formed a task force, and I'd be the chair of that. What they're doing, when I testified, there's 5 separate counties that testified. So they're trying to look at the region as a whole. So Collier testified, Charlotte testified, Flagler County did, Volusia, and Lee. They continue to look at this holistically. Glenn's done a phenomenal job breaking down our issues from natural resources to utility to Department of Transportation, not only together, but then broken down by city. I've interacted with Representative Botaner, and they just look like they're dealing with the counties as a whole. You all gave me the privilege of being the chairman. I certainly accept the responsibility, but want to continue to make sure we advocate up there, because what was apparent is there's 5 counties looking for money from 2 different storms. So I've certainly been advised by some of the senior people in the executive branch it would make more sense to be a frequent flyer, as we need a lot of assistance.
Very good. We're going to miss you at zoning, but we appreciate you going up there and carrying the water.
And the last item is the task force first meeting will be February 27th. I just want to make that announcement.
The first task force,
Yes.
February 27th. Excellent.
Where's that meeting at? On the 27th? Do you have it?
It's going to be held here.
Here? Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Very good. All right. Does that conclude your commission?
Yes, it does.
Okay, very good. I had one commissioner item I wanted to bring up, and it's something I've talked with our administration about already, but one of the things that I think many people, especially those who are, they have students or children in youth sports, are very concerned about the time that it's taking to repair the lights at our athletic facilities and other reasons why they haven't been able to use the athletic facilities. I don't want people to feel like we're ignoring them. I don't want people to feel like they're going unheard. In fact, you know, I can even just share with you a little bit of the comments that we're getting. This was from Marlonique Wilkinson, who reached out on social media. She says, our kids are being penalized due to the inaction of the county to resolve this issue at any point over the last 3 months. This is not the children's fault. Our kids are facing are not the only ones facing this type of dilemma, but the county needs to step up and do their part to returning to normalcy so that the children don't miss out on any more. So, you know, I want to just kind of talk about the things we've talked about in my office. You know, are we ignoring the problem, and what are we doing to try and help get these youth sports fields back in place so that kids can have some semblance of the normalcy that they had pre-storm?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like the board, youth sports is very important to all of us, and we're committed to ensuring the safety of our participants. Just to take a real quick step back, after the storm, we did an assessment, a quick assessment of all our facilities to make sure that if they were usable or not right away, and what we had to do to allow people to access those public areas. Following that, shortly after, if you all remember, we had a light fall in Estero off of one of our ball fields. We temporarily closed those ball fields for a week, or a couple weeks to be exact, to ensure that no other lights would fall, and that we had no other issues with light poles in any of those parks. Through that process, we did find out not only were lights falling, but we had large fixtures that were ready to fall through that process. So our staff, through DOT, EHAB and his team at facilities, and the park staff all were out checking those lights to ensure that we could secure them and make sure people could play. Myself, Christine Brady, and Jesse and his team have been speaking to the youth leagues. We have made the fields available to them at all different times except for unfortunately, when it gets dark. So the important thing is we're allowing them to use the field. The field is dedicated to them. So if we only have one field that's closed, and that's Hancock Park. And with that, we have moved the youth to Judd Park as well as to Cape Coral. We work with the city of Cape Coral and moved them over there. So it is our commitment to ensure that the fields are open to the public. I know that the leagues have adjusted. Like I said, the number of us have spoken to the league officials to ensure that they could use the fields. They've adjusted their schedules accordingly until we can get lights. We're not sure how long it's going to take, and the reason is we have 167 projects in parks alone. Ball fields are a priority. They have been moved up to the top. Other than life safety, that would be next. It is going to take some time to inspect all those sites. What we did was just to secure the light poles so people could play, but it's going to take some time for us to get the inspections from FEMA. At the same time, we are going to be doing other measures so that we can start ordering the parts once we know what the issues are. So once the inspections are done, we can move with the corrective action for each of those fields. So we have very minimal light usage right now at all. It's going to take a little bit of time, and that includes the Minnesota Twins and the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox field lights were playable, the Twins were not. So the Twins are in the same boat probably until the end of the month. So we are moving as fast as we can, but youth sports, again, as it is your priority, it is our priority as well.
Very good. So talk to me real quickly about Hancock is closed then. Did you have any timeline at all on when that could reopen?
Right now, let me ask Mr. Lavender. The part of the problem with Hancock are all the fences and dugouts are damaged. So it will take time. Again, it's a FEMA inspection issue, but I'll have Jesse give a little more detail on that specific park.
Good morning. Yes, it's going to take quite some time, probably not as long as the sports lighting, but the fences are in disrepair and several of the backstops are in jeopardy of falling down, so we cannot allow play safely until that is corrected.
Very good. Do you have contractors available to do the work, or is it that we're still waiting on FEMA inspections before we can even touch it?
We're waiting on FEMA inspections.
Okay.
Yes.
Very good. Thanks, Mr. Lavender. And the other thing, Mr. Harner, I think that you cleared up for me was we had a safety issue, right? This wasn't a matter of just bulbs being out.
That is correct.
So there's safety issue. We were worried about things falling. One did even fall at one place. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't put kids in any place where they could get hurt. Are the safety issues cleared up at the parks that were open, that we do have open, that we're allowing them to use during the day?
Yes, Mr. Chair. As of today, I believe all the inspections will be completed. What we did, just for the public's information, what we did is prioritized usage. So if a ball field was being used for games or practices, that took priority. If a ball field wasn't being used right away, obviously that was a little later down the line. But as of today, all the ball fields will be. And tennis courts and pickleball courts will all have inspected today.
Let me ask about this. So we're waiting on FEMA inspections. We want FEMA to bring more inspectors down here to help us get through these inspections. Would it be helpful if the board were to author a letter to FEMA requesting that they send more inspectors down here and that they complete these inspections at a quicker pace?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think any efforts would be helpful. We have spoken to a number of different people about that, but yes, that would be helpful.
All right, so commissioners, could I get a motion to that effect? Okay, motion from Commissioner Ruane, second from Commissioner Pendergrass. Very good. And I'll work with staff on the letter and just sign it and send it off to FEMA then to ask for those extra inspectors. Very good. All right, Commissioner Ruane.
One question, and maybe staff could help. A lot of constituents have been asking me, since it's not public knowledge yet, could we opine and or assist in making sure that Hurricane Ian is a qualified disaster loss as opposed to a casualty loss? The difference is casualty losses are 10% of your AGI, and qualified disaster losses are certainly dollar for dollar written off. So it has not, per the website of the IRS, not been declared a qualified disaster loss. I've had many constituents from my district, as you can imagine, the devastation. If you're not receiving enough proceeds from your insurance, you're actually out money. You can actually deduct it from your taxes. I didn't know if you could help in that regard.
Mr. Harner, yeah?
We don't know the mechanics of it, but we can look into that, and I believe Mr. Glenn said that we could also look at the federal lobbyist as well. So yes, we will look into that.
Commissioner Pendergrass?
I was going to ask about one thing is Three Oaks Park. Do we have any updates on that? Three Oaks, is that going to be open after the day after the inspection, or is it going to be closed to, Jesse already walked away, I don't know. And also, I do want to say, Commissioner Hammond, thanks for bringing this up. There's one thing I think everybody in Lee County understands, Lee County's commitment to youth sports. Great product of it here. And, we actually have Sean Smith here today. He's the new General Operations Manager for Red Sox. Sean's waiting to meet with me after this meeting. So Lee County has shown our dedication to sports, youth sports, and to Major League sports. So thank you, Sean, for being here. Jesse, do you have any update on Three Oaks Park?
Yes, sir. Three Oaks Park is open. We do not have any lights working there.
Right, so it's just daytime only.
Daytime
Okay, I think the concern is, I think we're all getting contact by different people, either Buckingham, Cape Coral, or in different fields. So as hopefully people are patient. This is obviously, it's important to Lee County, but again, other life and property is important too. So thank you. Okay.
Good. Thanks, Mr. Pendergrass. Commissioner Pendergrass. So at this point, would you like to amend the motion to also provide direction that we could do a separate letter or include it in both letters that we talk about the disaster declaration as well as the FEMA inspectors? Commissioner?
It may be better if we can go with they're two separate entities in terms of revenue being one, FEMA doing another, but if we can find that out, and if we don't find the answer that's positive, that's a qualified loss, if we could write a letter, that'd be great.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to definitely send the letter about the FEMA inspectors so that we can get the youth parks and sports fields up as quickly as possible. It was made by Commissioner Ruane, seconded by Commissioner Pendergrass. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak in public comment on that item? I see none. Are there any further comments by the board? Commissioner Sandelli?
The only comment I wanted to make is, and I've talked to staff, I've been out to a couple of the fields. When we talk about repairing lighting, it's not like a light bulb in your house. I mean, it requires equipment, how you get to examine it, whether it's drones or something like that. So it's a little bit more complicated process, and tried to communicate it to our constituents as much as I can. So it's a little bit more complicated than I think sometimes we give credit for. So thanks.
Thank you for your comment. Absolutely. All right. Seeing no further comments then, are there any objections to the motion? I see none. That motion carries unanimously. And that concludes my commissioner item. At this point, we'll move to committee appointments. Commissioner Greenwald, do you have any appointments you'd like to make? Okay.
Derek Fielder, a new appointment, Derek Fielder to the Lehigh Acres Street Lighting Committee.
Okay. And go ahead and make the motion for all your appointments, or is it only one?
There's only one.
Okay, so motion from Commissioner Greenwald, second from Commissioner Pendergrass. Any further discussion? Are there any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. Commissioner Pendergrass, any appointments?
Done today.
Okay. Commissioner Sandelli, any appointments?
I have one. It's a new appointment, Warren Wolfslager to the Anchorage Way Intercoastal MSBU.
Okay, very good. Do we have a second for that? Second from, motions from Commissioner Sandelli, seconds from Commissioner Ruane. Any further discussion? Any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. Commissioner Ruane?
Yes, I have three, sir. Two are reappointments, both to the Gasparilla Island Municipal Service Benefit Unit, Mark Messelink and Francis Brannon. And then in the historical preservation, I have a new appointment for David Barkley.
Very good. We have a motion from Commissioner Ruane, second from Commissioner Greenwald. Any further discussion? Any objection? No objection. That motion carries unanimously. I will need a motion and a second. I have two new appointments. I'd like to appoint Sean Robertson to the Well Construction Advisory Board and Timothy Hennessy to the Community Action Agency.
Motion.
Second.
Motion for approval from Commissioner Pendergrass, second from Commissioner Ruane. Any further discussion? Any objection? No objection. That motion carries unanimously. Very good. All right, at this time, we'll move to county manager items.
Thank you,
Mr. Harner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have two items. I'd like to ask Glenn Sire to talk about debris pickup.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. We do want to talk about the county's right-of-way debris collection mission. Currently, we have a March 29th FEMA deadline for getting reimbursed for that right-of-way mission. If we back off from that date, what we're proposing to do is announce tomorrow that all areas of the county that have not yet been set for a final collection date be set for March 1st. So that would allow 3 weeks from the time of announcement to the deadline for setting your storm debris out, and then that allows Crowder Golf the bulk of the month to pick it up. And we are talking about the most impacted areas here, so it will take some time between that set out deadline and final collection. Any questions about that?
Any questions, commissioners, on that? Okay, I see none. Okay, Mr. Sire?
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Chair, our second item is to amend the legislative agenda, and I'd like to ask Glenn Sire to address that as well.
Commissioners, we are asking you to amend the legislative agenda that you had adopted previously. We have now been able to get our arms around the Ian damage report for the county, as well as, probably most importantly, get some project cost estimates from Florida Department of Transportation for the Sanibel Causeway repairs, as well as the Matlacha corridor. So we've incorporated direct Hurricane Ian-related project costs into this amended version of the legislative agenda. And if you adopt it, we will get all of the project forms to the legislative delegation so that they can get those projects entered.
Very good.
I'll gladly move the item.
Okay, motion for approval of that request by Commissioner Ruane, second from Commissioner Sandelli. Any discussion on that or questions on that? Since we have a motion on the floor, then does anybody wish to speak in public comment on the motion before we vote on it? Okay, I'll close public comment. Any further discussion on that item? Seeing none, are there any objections? No objections, that motion carries unanimously. All right, Mr. Harner, anything further?
No, thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair.
All right, very good. At this time, we'll move to county attorney items. Mr. Wesh?
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Very good. At this time, we'll move to public presentation of matters by citizens. I don't have any cards that have been turned in for this part. Does anybody wish to speak? This is your time to speak on anything that was not on the agenda today. Okay, go ahead.
First of all, I would like to thank Commissioner Ruane for representing our county at the state level in regard to presenting in terms of resiliency. That's much appreciated. I heard earlier today that that the county is going to hire a number of people in the Department of Community Development, which I agree with. However, I think that there's also a need to have a situational analysis of what's happening in the county in order to inform decision-making going forward. And I think that working with the academic community, the university partners at FGCU, at FAU, and informing decision-making on that's taken into consideration an analysis of where we are now is needed instead of just necessarily going straight forward. And in that, I want to speak just briefly about the role of the community rating system and having a consultant like Lori Lair, who's well known for taking Monroe County down to a 3, which seems like an impossible task. But she is a fantastic consultant, at least in terms of my research. And having that piece in place so that we're being credited through the rating system and then acting regionally to get our watershed management plans in place for the Estero River, the Imperial River, down through the Cocohatchee, those are necessary steps so that members of our community can benefit from some lowering of their flood insurance rates, because it's the members of our community who are really, really hurting right now. It's been well known in the state that people have been impacted by huge increases to their insurance even prior to Ian. I personally have friends who chose, fatefully so, to not continue with their flood insurance that then lost their homes. And so when we can unify our actions and act regionally and act in a way that cultivates resiliency in our community, we're all winners in terms of mitigating the real clear and present hazards to our community. And those hazards are magnified when development excludes a conservation interest. And so I'm just asking that we work to hire the consultant and work to unify our response to make it regional and restore some of that cooperation between the county and municipalities and our partner counties. Last, I want to say that it's important that we place our infrastructure assets in places that do not flood and that we follow that resiliency guidance. We weigh in on it, but we also adopt those practices in our county. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Ellis, for your comments. Does anyone else wish to speak in public comment today? Just raise your hand, I'll call you forward. Okay, seeing none then, I'll close public comment. Mr. Harner, at this time, is there any further business before us?
No, there is not.
All right, seeing no further business, we're adjourned.